Well, let me first say that those are not the necessary reforms that the country needs. The necessary reforms that the country needs are much more ambitious than that. First of all, if you look at the 50 billion euros in spending cuts, this is far from enough. If you take, for example, the new debt that the country will have to borrow this year, it's about 170 billion euros on 1 year. So 50 billion euros on 3 years is not enough. We have to do much more than this and be more ambitious. Then, if you look at the simplification that the president talked about, these are measures that are very nice, but we need to reduce the tax code. We need to reduce the labor code, which is they're both much too big and much too complicated. So it's not just a few measures here and there. We really need to rethink completely the regulatory environment of this country. Now, if you look at the timing of those measures and so-called reforms, well, it really is not ambitious at all. The prime minister talked about reducing the corporate tax to 28% from 33 or even 38% today. Well, this is very nice, but this will only happen in 2020, in 6 years. If you look at the halving of the number of regions that we have, the regional governments that we have, this is nice, but this will only happen in 2017. If you look at the suppression of the département layer, the local government layer, this will only happen in 2021, in 7 years. And the emergencies today, same thing for tax cuts for households. This will only happen the effect will only happen in 2017. The problems we have is, they are today, not in 7 years. So this is not ambitious at all. Even with those very non-ambitious measures, it's going to be very difficult for the government to implement them. First of all, because of the opposition of the left itself. Many MPs actually wrote a new pact for more public spending, more interventionism, and more regulations and all that, as usual, and go completely against François Hollande and Manuel Valls' semi-attempt to sort of liberalize the country. Then you obviously have the opposition of the civil servants themselves, who do not want to lose their jobs. It's very clear that today it was announced that the regions Franche-Comté and Burgundy will merge very quickly, but without any loss in public jobs, which is kind of weird, because if we merge regions, the idea is to enjoy economies of scales and not employ the same amount of civil servants as we used to. Actually, the administration in France is a huge obstacle to the reforms. Then you have obviously the lobbies, private lobbies, not only public ones, but the private ones, who live off the complexity of the regulations that we have, especially tax regulations. Many big companies make a lot of money helping other companies try to find their way in the tax maze that we have, but also lobbies who receive subsidies from the regions, the various layers of governments. They also probably will lobby against this. Well, those measures, if they can implement them, would probably generate, in the short term, it would probably generate a decline in demand, in global demand, which would trigger a very short-term recession. But it's a necessary process. It's a necessary stage in order to make sure that the economy is adapting. And that's why one very important aspect of the reforms is to make the labor market as flexible as possible, and to make the business environment as good as possible in order for companies to be able to hire a maximum of people who will be downsized in the public sector. This is a major issue, and that's why the reforms have to be thought in a complementary way and a parallel way. But then after that, you will have, the economy will be finally able to breathe, and you will have a recovery, a sustainable recovery, uh, not based on stimulus spending and all this. Well, if Holland is and Mr. Valls are not able to implement those reforms, it's bad news. It's bad news for France. It's bad news for Europe. It means that the country will be downgraded big time. Uh, and obviously, the France is still the second biggest debt market in Europe, which means that most investors still trust the country. But after a new round of downgrades, this might change because the credibility of the country will be hurt. And today, the problem is that today, the first item of the French government budget is the interest rates that it pays on the French debt. So if those interest rates go up, this will mean that this will stifle the finances of the country, just like it did in Italy, Greece, or Spain. And given that France is a big player in Europe, it's the second biggest player in the rescue mechanisms in the eurozone. This would actually mean not good news.